Conquest, the oldest dream of power. For 5,000 years, while most of humanity was born, lived, and died within a few miles of home, a handful of men looked at the map of the world and decided it belonged to them. They built empires that stretched across continents, toppled in a single lifetime, and changed the course of history forever. From the very first emperor who ever lived to the last great conqueror of the modern age, this is the story of the men who redrew the world by the sword. Welcome to History Nexus. Our story begins more than 4,000 years ago, in the land between two rivers, Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization. Here, a man born a commoner, abandoned as a baby in a basket on the river, so the legend says, rose up to overthrow a king and unite the warring cities of Sumer under a single crown. His name was Sargon of Akkad, and he forged the world's first true empire. He campaigned from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean, ruled for more than 50 years, and kept 5,000 loyal soldiers who ate at his table every single day. Every emperor who came after him was, in a sense, walking in his footsteps. The empire he built crumbled within a few generations, but the idea of empire never died. Almost 17 centuries later on the Iranian plateau, a new kind of conqueror arose. Cyrus the Great took the small kingdom of Persia and in just 20 years built the largest empire the world had yet seen, swallowing Media, Lydia, and mighty Babylon, often without a fight. But what set Cyrus apart was not how he conquered, it was how he ruled. Where others enslaved and slaughtered, Cyrus freed the captives of Babylon, let conquered peoples keep their gods and their customs, and wrote what some call the first charter of human rights. He was a conqueror the conquered came to love. He died fittingly on the battlefield, still expanding his empire at the very edge of the known world. 2 centuries on, a young king would dream of conquering it all. Alexander of Macedon was just 20 when his father was murdered, and the throne became his. Over the next 13 years, he would never lose a single battle. He shattered the Persian Empire, the very superpower Cyrus had built, at Issus and at Gaugamela, outnumbered and unstoppable. He marched his army over 11,000 miles, from Greece to Egypt, where he was crowned a living god, to the plains of India, where his exhausted men finally refused to go a step further. He founded more than 20 cities and named them all after himself. And then, at just 32 years old in the palace of Babylon, Alexander died, of fever or poison, no one knows. Asked who should inherit his empire, he is said to have whispered, "To the strongest." His generals tore it apart in 40 years of war. But not every great conqueror built an empire. Some are remembered for one impossible, unforgettable campaign. In Carthage, Rome's deadliest rival, a general named Hannibal swore a childhood oath of eternal hatred against Rome, and he kept it. In 218 BC, he did the unthinkable. He marched an army in a column of war elephants over the frozen, deadly passes of the Alps, losing thousands to the cold and to ambush, to strike Rome from the north, where no one ever expected him. For 15 years, he ran wild across Italy, crushing Roman army after Roman army. At Cannae, he surrounded and destroyed a force nearly twice his size, killing tens of thousands in a single afternoon, in a maneuver still taught in military academies to this day. He never took the city of Rome itself, but he made the most powerful empire on earth tremble for a generation. Rome learned from its scars, and in time it produced a conqueror of its own. Julius Caesar spent 8 brutal years conquering Gaul, what is now France, in a war that may have killed 1 million people and enslaved 1 million more. He invaded Britain, bridged the River Rhine to terrify the Germanic tribes, and wrote his own legend in books that are still read today. When the Senate ordered him to give up his army, Caesar instead marched it across a small river called the Rubicon, an act of war against his own republic. "The die is cast," he said. He won and made himself dictator for life until, on the Ides of March, his own senators stabbed him 23 times on the Senate floor. His death did not save the republic, it ended it. For centuries, Rome ruled the West, but every empire eventually meets its nightmare. From the steppes of Asia came a horseman whose name still means terror, Attila, king of the Huns, the man the Romans called the Scourge of God. He carved a path of fire across Europe, from the Black Sea to the gates of Paris, burning cities and draining fortunes in gold from a terrified Roman Empire. It was said that grass never grew again where his horse had trodden. He brought the Western Roman Empire to its knees, and then, on his own wedding night, Attila died suddenly, choking on his own blood. His empire vanished almost overnight, but he had helped to shatter the ancient world forever. From the ruins of Rome, a new Europe would be forged by the sword of a single man. Charlemagne, king of the Franks, spent more than 40 years at war, uniting most of Western Europe for the first time since the Caesars. He conquered Italy, crushed the Saxons in decades of brutal fighting, once beheading thousands of prisoners in a single day, and forced Christianity across the continent at the point of a sword. On Christmas Day in the year 800, the Pope crowned him emperor, the first in the West for over 300 years. They would call him the Father of Europe. The empire he built would fracture among his grandsons, but its borders still echo in the nations of Europe today. Some conquests last only an afternoon and change a nation forever. In 1066, a duke from Normandy named William crossed the English Channel with a fleet and a claim to the English throne. In a single day at the Battle of Hastings, his army met the English king, Harold. By nightfall, Harold lay dead, an arrow through his eye, the legend says. And England had a new master. William seized the land, replaced its nobility, raised towering stone castles to crush every rebellion, and counted every cow and acre of his new kingdom in the famous Domesday Book. One battle, one day, and the entire course of English history, its language, its kings, its very identity, was changed forever. But the greatest conqueror of all was still to come, and he came from nowhere. Born an outcast on the freezing Mongolian steppe, a boy named Temujin united the warring Nomad tribes and took a new name, Genghis Khan. With an army of horse archers, fast, disciplined, and merciless, he built the largest connected empire in human history, stretching from the Pacific Ocean to the edge of Europe. Cities that resisted were wiped from the earth. His conquests may have killed as many as 40 million people. Yet he also opened the Silk Road, connected East and West, and ruled with a brutal efficiency. When he died, his body was carried in secret to an unmarked grave, and every witness was killed so that it would never be found. To this day, no one ever has. A century later, a man arose who dreamed of restoring the empire of Genghis. Tamerlane, Timur the Lame, walked with a limp from an old wound, yet he conquered everything from India to Turkey to the very gates of China. He was a living paradox. He turned his capital, Samarkand, into one of the most dazzling cities on earth, a jewel of art and learning, while building towers from the skulls of those who dared resist him, sometimes tens of thousands at a time. His campaigns may have killed 17 million people. He died at 70 on the march to invade China, and legend says a curse was carved upon his tomb. When I rise, the world shall tremble. Some conquerors are remembered for ending an entire age. For 1,000 years, the city of Constantinople, capital of the Roman Empire that still survived in the East, had never once fallen. Its walls were the stuff of legend. Then came a 21-year-old sultan, Mehmed II. He brought the largest cannon the world had ever seen, and when his fleet could not break the great chain across the harbor, he had his ships dragged overland, on greased logs, over a hill and down into the bay. After 53 days, the ancient walls finally broke. Constantinople fell. The Roman Empire, after 1,500 years, was at last truly dead. Mehmed rode into the city and declared himself its new Caesar. He was just 21 years old. Then the world itself grew larger, and a new kind of conquest began. When Spanish adventurers crossed the ocean to the Americas, they found civilizations of millions, the Aztecs and the Inca. And against all reason, they toppled them with only a few hundred men. Hernán Cortés burned his own ships so that his men could never retreat and brought down the mighty Aztec Empire. Francisco Pizarro captured the emperor of the Inca, filled an entire room with gold as his ransom, and then executed him anyway. But their greatest weapon was not steel or horses or guns. It was disease, smallpox, which raced ahead of them and killed millions who had never even seen a European. Two empires, thousands of years in the making, gone in a single generation. And so we come to the very last of the great conquerors, Out of the chaos of the French Revolution rose a young artillery officer from the island of Corsica, Napoleon Bonaparte. A military genius who seemed to bend the very rules of war, he crowned himself Emperor of France, and in just over a decade made himself master of nearly all of Europe. He won staggering victories, Austerlitz, his masterpiece, against every king who dared to oppose him. But his ambition knew no limit. In 1812, he invaded Russia with the largest army Europe had ever assembled. 600,000 men, and the Russian winter destroyed it. Fewer than 1 in 10 ever came home. Defeated at last at Waterloo, he died in exile on a tiny island in the middle of the ocean. And with him, the age of the great conquerors came to an end. Sargon, Alexander, Genghis, Napoleon. 5,000 years apart, yet bound together by the same fire, the will to take a world that was never theirs and force it to bow. They redrew the map, toppled civilizations, and built empires that seemed to touch the sky. And yet, almost every one of those empires crumbled the very moment its maker was gone. Perhaps that is the final lesson of the conquerors, that you can win the whole world by the sword, but you can never hold it forever. So tell me, who do you think was the greatest of them all? The undefeated Alexander, the unstoppable Khan, or Napoleon, who came closest of all in the modern age? Drop your answer down in the comments. Subscribe to History Nexus, where history connects, for new journeys into the greatest stories ever told. Because empires rise and empires fall, but the men who built them are never forgotten.